Welcome to Back to Music 101. We're looking at chapter 22, talking about Purcell and early opera. So we talked a little bit about in the last lecture opera, which was the most important new genre of the Baroque era. It's a large-scale sung drama. It has vocal, instrumental music, poetry, acting, scenery, and costumes. So basically, it's a play, but they are singing the action. Strong emotions through the music with this hyper reality. Here are some of the principal components of Baroque opera. We have the recitative, which is a declamatory vocal style. Basically, it's the time of the opera that moves the action forward. So it imitates and emphasizes natural inflections of speech, and it accumulates tension in the action, moves the plot forward of the opera forward, as I said. Then we have the aria, which is a lyrical song. It's highly emotional. The character dwells on an intense emotion. The action is frozen and to release the tension of whatever's happened, and often sung out of the opera context. We have other ensemble numbers, duets, trios, quartets, depending on how many people are singing. Duets would have 2 people singing, trios would have 3, quartets would have 4. Then we have the chorus that provides the backups of the solo voice, and they kind of comment sometimes on the action. The orchestra sets the mood. There's the overture, which is the orchestral introduction. We have the sinfonias, which are little interludes between scenes. They're like the scene change music. So this is an opera performance in Rome by this Italian painter here. A libretto is the text or the script of the opera. So we have someone that writes the music, and then we have someone that writes the actual text or the lyrics, basically. The earliest librettos were had a lot of mythology, epic poetry, talking about ancient history, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, and Purcell's opera. Then we have the librettist, and is the person that wrote the lyrics, and the composer that writes the music. And there was a lot of reflections on human character and interaction. So early opera in Italy, it's kind of an outgrowth of the Renaissance theatrical traditions, such as royal weddings, ceremonial occasions, lavish spectacles, and scenic displays. The opera kind of spread through that, and Monteverdi is one of the most early Italian opera composers, and we have Orfeo and the Coronation of Poppei. They kind of went from this being more for like special events to the public and for widespread entertainment. And the first public opera house was in Venice. The operas were accompanied by orchestra ensembles that became standard during this time, and the Italian-style opera spread throughout Europe during turn of the 18th century, popular in Western Europe as well. It was rejected in France. National style was the court ballet and the classical tragedy traditions. So the Italian-style opera was basically the style of opera that was used during Baroque, classical, all the way into the Romantic time period, and the only place that it was rejected was in France, which was more about ballet. So the opera in England, we have the masques, or the stage plays. They were vocal and instrumental music with poetry and dance, with popular music among the aristocracy. We know we have the Commonwealth happening that had stage plays forbidden by the Puritans, and play set music presented as concerts. So the opera was looking a little bit different. We have Purcell in 1659 to 1695, was an English court musician. He was a composer, an organist, and a singer, and his particular style was a combination of Italian, French, and English. And he output masques, who works the English operas, sacred and secular vocal music, as well as instrumental music. This is a picture of Henry Purcell, and actually Purcell was probably one of the greatest English composers, and there was a break from English composers for a while until more of the late Impressionistic contemporary era. So this guy is really important because he made a mark on music, and then we didn't hear from English composers for a while after him. His very famous opera is Dido and Aeneas, which comes from Virgil's Aeneid, an ancient Roman epic um, piece of work there. It was presented in girls' school in London. It has a compressed plot so that the audience was familiar with the story. So it didn't talk about everything, it just talked specifically about Dido and Aeneas. Dido's Lament is one of the very famous portions of this, and it's a powerful modal for female grief. So the main characters in the opera are Aeneas, who is our adventuring hero of the Aeneid. Dido is the queen of Carthage, and we have Belinda, which is Dido's serving maid. So here is a painting of the conqueror Aeneas greeting the queen of Dido. So basically, if you're familiar with the plot summary of the Aeneid, of this portion of the Aeneid, Aeneas is shipwrecked at Carthage. Aeneas and Dido fall in love. However, the gods command Aeneas to found Rome, and he leaves. So grief-stricken, Dido takes her own life, and the flames from the funeral pyre light the way for Aeneas' ship to go and found Rome. So, in the clip that we're going to listen to, we have the opening and then the lament of Act 3. So the opening of Act 3. So operas were broken up into different acts. They could be, operas can be really long. I've played for an opera and it's probably 4 hours long. So, but it's broken up into these different acts. And so like the first act would tell a portion of the story and then there'd be like a break. So it'd be like an episode on a show. And then the second act would happen and it'd be like the second episode. So it continues of what's going on, but it's not completing the story, and then et cetera, et cetera. So it's like different like episodes of a TV show, if you want to think of it that way. So the opening is a hornpipe. Remember we talked about that a hornpipe is a dance with a short snap, long rhythms, kind of like swung. Sung responsorially, so we have a solo man and a men's chorus. So one person would sing and then the other person responds. And there's underlying chromaticism there, foreshadowing Dido's lament. Then we have a recitative. Remember, a recitative is a spot of the opera where they move the action along. And so this is where she's talking to Belinda and she decides her fate, that she is basically going to take her own life. And then we have the aria. So remember, aria is the portion of the opera where the action stops and the lead actress or the lead actor will sing about whatever is happening. So it's When I Am Laid in Earth, and it's a lyrical aria in 2 sections at a slow triple meter and sung over 11 statements of ground bass. Remember, we have the figured bass. We have the ground bass talking about the bass portion may not necessarily have been written out. We have the descending bass line, which is a symbolic of grief in Baroque music. So it's kind of neat to see that music is starting to take that type of thing. So we're just going to listen to the recitative and lament. We're going to listen to this while I think anyway. Well, while we're waiting on that, I do want to kind of show you, because it's really fun to see these operas acted out, because it is a part of the action is watching the opera. So I really wanted to show you guys a clip of Purcell's Dido and Aeneas. If my internet would cooperate with me here. We post another video, or you will have to go listen, and I can post a link to the video on on Canvas so you can watch it if my internet does not decide to cooperate with me here. So that's the opening. Let's go over to the lament and the recitative. So you have Dido talking to Belinda here, basically resolving to take her own life because of her sorrow. I'm going to skip over to the lament here. So you can tell like the difference of this music now, how emphasis of emotion there is. There's so much emotion in the voice. It's not so cut and dry, kind of like the Renaissance music for. So here's what to listen for the recitative.
Here's what to listen for in the final scene, recitative and lament of Purcell's Dido and Aeneas. The scene begins with recitative, a solo vocal declamation of text. You can tell it's recitative because of the free rhythm, no strong sense of a beat, and sparse accompaniment.
You can find the lyrics for this on page 128 and 129 in your textbook if you would like to follow along. So basically she's talking about, the lyrics were, thy hand, Belinda, darkness shades me. On thy bosom let me rest. More I would, but death evades me. Death is now a welcome guest. So she is now basically resolving to kill herself, which is very sad.
Here's what to listen for in the final scene.
Just kidding. Trying to get over here to the meter.
The recitative is followed by an aria, a song for solo voice with orchestral accompaniment. You can tell this is an aria because of the tuneful melody, regular beat, and orchestral accompaniment. This particular aria has a slow tempo and is in triple meter. You can hear those features in this excerpt from the beginning of the aria.
The words for this are on page 129. Okay, now we're going to talk about the ground bass.
This aria also features a ground bass, a short bass line repeated over and over during the aria. Listen to the opening of the aria again. This time, listen for the descending bass line in the opening orchestral introduction. You'll hear it stated one time. After the singer enters, you will hear the same descending bass line twice.
That's the first time.
When you listen to the entire aria, you'll hear the ground bass once by itself, 8 times while the soprano sings, and 2 more times after she finishes. So remember to listen for the recitative and the aria. The recitative has free rhythm and sparse accompaniment. The aria has a regular beat, tuneful melody, AABB form, and a ground bass, which conveys Dido's emotions of grief and sorrow.
So just make sure you're not confused about that with ground bass. Ground bass just means a descending bass line, and it's kind of hard to hear through the computer here. So make sure you go back and you listen to it, but that's all that it means, is you have a short bass line that's repeated over and over during the aria, and it's just a descending bass line. So that was representation of grief in Baroque music, was that descending bass line. So just make sure you go back and listen to that just in case you were confused. So that is an example of opera during the Baroque times. And that was, we already talked about this. This is found on, here's an example of that ground bass. As you can see it chromatically descending. So we go from G to F sharp to F natural to E flat, etc. So it's just going down. You can follow the shape of it too here. We're just kidding. We're going to get the Rainbow Wheel of Happiness. Okay, here we go. Right here, you can see how it's going down. So that would be that descending bass line. That is terrible rubbish drawing, but you get the idea. And that's all for chapter 22. We mainly talked about opera in this chapter, and we will be talking about Johann Sebastian Bach, one of my favorite composers, and the Lutheran Cantata in the next lecture.